Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Plaza Soroban. As Justin said, my name is Nicole Adair. I am a senior developer advocate at the Stellar Foundation. This is my first Meridian, so I'm very excited to be here. And I'm also very excited to be joined by this great group of panelists. So I think we'll start by, I'm just going to invite each of you to say a few words about who you are, what you're building on Soroban, how long you've been in the ecosystem, which I know for some of you is a very, very long time. So James, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. My name's James Bain. I'm the CEO of a data indexer called Subquery. Subquery is an open source data indexer that developers in Stellar and Soroban can use to index information from the chain and serve it into their applications when they're building those.
Hello, everyone. I'm Orbitlens from Stellar Expert team. My actual name is Vyacheslav, but I think Orbit is better for everyone because everyone knows me by this nickname. We at Stellar Expert, we build Stellar Expert Ledger Explorer. We also develop Albedo ecosystem wallet and a lot of various low-level ecosystem-focused libraries to support development for ecosystem. And also we provide API for accounts metadata discovery, for assets, additional properties, and many other interesting on-chain stuff.
My name is Anthony Barker. Been in the Stellar ecosystem for a while. Started a company with a friend named Tempo, and then more recently we created this thing called BP Ventures, which helps fintechs integrate and use Stellar more easily with like one-click solutions. And this project, we looked around at different oracles on different platforms and realized that there's some data that things like Chainlink were providing that we need in the Stellar ecosystem, such as XLM volatility feeds and emerging market data, which is what sort of critical to the Stellar ecosystem. So that's why we started this project.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, as the title points out, this is a panel about access to off-chain data in both ways, right? So there's oracles and indexers that we're going to be talking about. I think it would be helpful for us to start with some kind of high-level ideas. So wherever you're coming from in your projects, oracles or indexers, or maybe both, I'd love to hear from each of you, what is significant about building oracles and indexers on Soroban? Why and how would you use these building blocks? And what in general are oracles and indexers solving in DeFi or in other use cases? So maybe Anthony, we can start with you.
Sure. If you look at existing blockchains such as Ethereum, the biggest use case is lending platforms. So you need a rate. If I'm borrowing one asset and I'm lending another asset, I need a rate to convert. And then typically a lending platform would have a margin where if the price went below a certain amount, it would be liquidated. So that's what we see with Aave and other lending programs. And there'll be the similar things that are being launched on Stellar. So that's one of the critical use cases. And that can be used for trading. So if I think one price of an asset is worth more than another asset, I can go and borrow for a short period of time that asset and then sell it on the Stellar Classic, for example. So that's one of the use cases I'm looking forward to.
Great. Orbit, stage is yours.
We've been building infrastructure for presenting Stellar assets in a human-friendly way for quite a long time. And of course, we collect a lot of on-chain metrics for assets on Stellar. So for us, it was a natural next step to create a smart contract and infrastructure to provide price feeds for Stellar smart contracts. And we've been in discussion with guys from the ecosystem since the last Meridian, and this is This ended up in a SEP 40 proposal made by Alex, me, and many more guys who also participated in this. We actually tried to gather all best practices and try to avoid most common mistakes of oracles and provide a unified consumer interface for the ecosystem smart contracts to pull the data and use it safely in the applications. And from the from the technical side, we decided to create our Oracle network created by trusted ecosystem entities, organizations, which will be connected directly to validators to pull the data from Stellar Classic assets and to provide this data on chain. So this is our solution, Reflector. I will be talking later today about it, so we'll be happy to show you the slides.
Yes, so as Anthony and Orbit mentioned, an Oracle's main job is to pull real-world off-chain information, so things that are out there in the real world, onto the chain into your smart contracts so they can be used by the smart contracts to do something. An index's job is pretty much exactly the opposite. It's take the information that results from something happening in the smart contract and being able to index that, organize it, save it in a more performant way so that you can then use it from an app or something, or you can analyze data across Soroban or Stellar from a macro view. They're both kind of used hand in hand, but they do kind of the opposite things. But still, the whole point here is about data availability. So data availability from the contracts and data availability within the apps that you build on top of those contracts.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Okay, from that high-level idea, I would love to hear a little bit more from each of you, I guess in more detail and maybe more specific to your projects and the things that you're building. What are the unique challenges that you're facing? We'll talk a little bit in a second about kind of security and risks and things, but generally speaking, when it comes to building indexers and oracles on Soroban and thinking about these larger applications, what are the unique challenges that you're facing in the work that you're building? How about we start with Orbit? Go ahead.
For us, the most challenging problem was that the platform we've been trying to build on, it was constantly evolving, and yeah, everybody understands this. And it's kind of like trying to build the plane in the air. There was an old commercial about this. I think we had at least 6 iterations following each release, and of course it was challenging. In many ways, Stellar platform is better than Ethereum and other platforms because, of course, it already stands on the shoulders of giants, right? And another probably challenging task for us is to pull the data in a convenient way and make sure that everyone will be able to use safe data. So the data is validated, and there are not some random organizations behind these oracles, but it's named organizations, well-known, established, who participate in consensus and provide price feeds for everyone. Something like this.
Great, yeah. Anthony?
Yeah, so we had similar, particularly had some challenges around the authentication, which was a little bit hard to do on JavaScript, I think, if I remember. So there were some bumps in the road with the development side, but that's mostly gone away, like Orbit said. Our other challenge is that for developing nations, the rates can be different. For example, Argentina, which is Stellar's popular there. Which Argentinian peso rate to the dollar do we use? Do we show the blue rate? Do we show the official rate? And there's also other rates, cash rate. So we're looking at different countries and we're trying to figure out where do we pull the correct data and how do we display that to apps to use it. And you'd think that the world would figure this out, but even Bloomberg or some of the big data players do not have like the black market rate to Nigerian currency. You have to like scrape a bunch of websites. That's been actually one of the bigger challenges.
Yeah.
From our perspective on an indexer, one of the biggest challenges for us and for our customers is around performance. So if you're indexing an entire chain that's got many years of history, there's a lot of blocks or ledgers involved with that. And it's a simple kind of computational issue where if you have to scan and retrieve data from n blocks, and n is quite a large number, it's going to take time. So there are two types of indexes out there, some that are more centralized than others, where they have pre-computed all that information from the chain and chucked into a big data warehouse, or a data lake is more popularly mentioned these days. And that's sitting in a hyperscaler like GCP somewhere, and you're indexing from this information. The other way, which is how we do it, is that we say that's a bad pattern, it's dangerous, it has security issues, which we can touch on later. It's best if you index directly from the chain, from an RPC or from a node that you're running locally. But then you have that end complexity. So for us, especially for a chain like Stellar that has quite some history, there's a lot of blocks to scan and to view, and so the challenge is to optimize every bit of code to make sure that when we're peeking through each of those blocks, to see if there's an event or an operation or an effect that you're looking for, you can kind of scan through fast and index your data. Because you don't want to wait a week for an indexer to index, the data that your app needs. You want to be able to have that done in a few hours. So there's that's your main kind of thread of like, how much complexity, how much speed and performance do you take versus how much centralization do you bring? And bringing that centralization in is the same kind of issue of that Oracle problem, where you guys will have this, right? Where if you're relying on one or two centralized oracles or services or indexes, the risk that they might provide incorrect data is there. The risk that they might deceive you or provide a fake rate is there, and that's something that you also have to consider with indexes and oracles.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's talk about that. That was going to be my next question. So when we think about off-chain data, of course, we're also talking about blockchain, which is intentionally separate from it is on-chain, right? These are kind of distinct spaces in this space, and so. What is that, how do you kind of address that relationship between optimization and efficiency on the one hand when it comes to accessing data and figuring out how to stay decentral with your projects or kind of maximize that in such a way that you're not sacrificing all of the values and the qualities that you get from using blockchain kind of at the very beginning?
Sorry?
Oh, yeah, floor is open.
Of course, the centralization problem mentioned by James, it's one of the cornerstones. But I'd like to mention also that on-chain data providers, if we are speaking about trading in the first place, because financial oracles is the most common types of oracles, not only some generic platform. So if we are talking about on-chain data, various DeFi platforms and algorithms may provide inherent problems based on how they quote the price. For example, any trade executed on the IMM effectively pushes the price, and if the contract consumes the data immediately from this oracle, from this contract, it it can be exploitable by attackers who can actually try to destabilize price on IMM by spoofing trades and take advantage from the lending platform, for example, by taking a loan on the under-collateralized value or using it in margin contracts, etc. On Stellar, some of these concerns are already addressed because re-entrancy attacks are like blocked on the platform level, but still it's still possible to push the prices and spoof the price on chain. And from that perspective, it's very important, again, as already said James, is to rely on several data sources. They can be aggregated in different ways. They can be put together. You can run any algorithm of averaging, for example, widely used TWAP averaging or any other kind of averaging to prevent spikes on the data from actually messing with your contract. So it's definitely one of the many challenges for oracles.
I mean, when the SEC looked at Bitcoin ETFs, one of their biggest issues was that the Bitcoin price, how do you know what the real Bitcoin price is? All the different exchanges have different rates. So the CME had a small team, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, that investigated how do you get the real Bitcoin price? What is the real Bitcoin price for fixings, 4 p.m. fixings? So they have a methodology where they take a certain number of exchanges and they throw off the outliers. That's how we're basically doing it. This is sort of following the same methodology that was done by the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. That works for certain things, like for crypto, there's lots of exchanges, so you can do this. For something like what's the Chilean peso rate today? Okay, the EU has a rate, but that's maybe not the real rate. So that it becomes a little bit complicated, and that's why there's sometimes there's not large amounts of data available. Like you were saying, you can't necessarily just rely on the last trade rate because that can be spoofed. So that people use time values. They look over time. Time values are great for setting a price, but not good for trading. So then you have a trade-off that you're doing by looking at price over time. So there's lots of things to be looked at that we can talk for hours about, but let's just say it's actually fairly complicated to come up with the correct prices.
Yeah, and like as you sort of mentioned, like the only way we've really found a good solution here is just having a sheer number of different people reporting that information to you. And safety in numbers also applies to indexes, right? If you're relying on a single indexer to provide data to your front end, and that single indexer then starts spoofing prices, it might cause users to do something that they don't want to do. You know, you could encourage users to sell assets because the price dumps or something, or shoots up and into the sky, which is not what they want to do. So just like for oracles indexes, we take the same approach where we're building a decentralized network, and rather than relying on a single indexer to provide data to your applications, you can rely on multiple independent trustless indexes in different parts of the world that don't know each other. We can't verify the data that they give is correct. No one can. Same with oracles, you can't verify the data from an indexer is correct. That is impossible. Well, in some cases it might be, but largely speaking it's impossible. But you can easily verify that the data that 2 independent indexes or 2 independent oracles is the same. And you can make an argument that if multiple individual third-party oracles or indexes are agreeing on something, the chances are that it is true is high or higher.
Within a spread.
Within a spread, of course. But I'm curious to know from your guys' perspective, from an indexer, we try to abstract that, and behind the scenes we will penalize indexes that don't agree. Is it the role of a good oracle to do that automatically? So that a user doesn't have to worry about that when they integrate that in their contracts?
Yes, definitely. I think so, because our platform, for example, makes sure that all the data is reported by participating quorum nodes in the exact same kind. For example, all the prices will be exactly equal among all the quorum nodes because they utilize the same algorithm to calculate these prices. And only if the majority of nodes agrees that the price is exactly that, only after this the transaction can be submitted on chain because we protect our Oracle with multisig. From the user perspective, of course, if you are going to build on top of Oracles, of course, you can choose the platform you trust, for example, us or BP Ventures or many other platforms, because I know that many other developers are working on the similar projects right now. But it's a good option for you to make a proxy contract. In SEP40, there is an information and a basic consumer interface that allows you to build some contract that takes several sources, combines them together in the same contract, and you can utilize it in your own applications. Of course, it's a bit more costly way, but if you are dealing with huge amounts of money, maybe for you it's the most optimal way to go. Try utilizing several oracles and combine the information together.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of taking us there. There's a lot of ways in which we can think for a very long time philosophically about like what is the place of something like truth in decentralization in blockchain when it comes to oracles and indexers and access to data. We're bringing something in and kind of saying it's true. But let's talk a little bit about the kind of practical side of things where as you're building these projects and thinking about data manipulation and data quality and kind of sourcing and how you might be aggregating data across multiple sources and security, kind of that the potential and the risks for data to be manipulated. What kinds of practical ways are you addressing those problems and kind of security questions in your projects?
For us, we're doing two main things. One is we have monitoring scripts and a website you can go and check. The second one is having clarity of where the data is coming from. So you as a user or consumer of the data can decide, well, I like the way he's calculating, or well, I like the way we're calculating it. So I'm going to use this for my app. Or I'm pulling everything from the indexer and displaying to the front-end user. So I think you have to leave it up to the user to make some decisions. And so there's a little bit, because there isn't one way of calculating. For example, when I worked at stock exchange, you say, okay, what's the value weighted average price? That's not even as a non-trader, you wouldn't know what does VWAP price even mean. Should we force the users to make that decision? No, not necessarily. But as a consumer of the data, you need to inform yourself a little bit about what's the price you're using.
Yeah, in our solution, as I mentioned before, we utilize validators consensus. Our nodes connect directly to Stellar Core databases. So it makes us a little bit more convinced that we have good sources of data, at least for Stellar network, because all the validators who actually produce the transactions, they write all this information in the local databases, and we pull directly from it. And even if part of the Stellar network goes down, we still can go live with our application with our platform. And it's very important in terms of reliability, because for consumer contracts, it may be a crucial decision how to utilize and how to deal with outages, because the outage is a great time to do some market manipulations, and arguably many outages are just like intros to huge manipulations on the markets. It's where the attackers make money. So of course, multiple sources, and it should be very reliable. Because for us, for example, Horizon is not an option, because Horizon it's usually connected to one single node, right? And if you take data from Horizon, you cannot be sure that it's really not tempered, and B, that the node is not behind the consensus or something like this. So again, if you are building something on top of Horizon, it's a good choice to take several Horizons and aggregate the data in mission-critical applications.
Like a practical thing that we do when a person configures Subquery to create an indexer for their project is, by default, we really strongly encourage them to keep their indexer deterministic. And what that means is that anyone that runs this code will receive the same data at the end of the day. It will index the same information, because the data in the blockchain's immutable. It will never change, and so the indexer can be therefore deterministic. And we strongly kind of encourage this, although we do allow people to change a flag and then pull in anything you want. So make a request to a third-party provider on the internet, or retrieve something from IPFS, or load a random JavaScript library. But that's a kind of a practical thing, which is, if it's deterministic, then it easily runs on a decentralized network, because you can confirm that two different indexes, and you can kind of guarantee that they will have the same data if they do it correctly. But that's, one main thing.
Great. Okay, we only have a handful of minutes left, but as all of you are in the Soroban ecosystem and building projects, that might kind of sync up in some of the ways that you're talking about, where do you see, the kind of interlocking nature of some of these building blocks, maybe beyond even oracles and indexers, within Soroban? A big question for 1 or 2 minutes left.
Well, I think that all these building blocks, that's a correct term for it, they can be pulled together in many different consumer applications. For example, money markets, like margin trading, algorithms, stable coins, algorithmic stable coins, some portfolio rebalancers, etc. It has really wide utilization. Actually, any application that needs a price quotation for some external token requires rather an oracle or any other way to pull this data. I actually don't like the term oracle, because it implies that you are guessing something, but right. As James said, it should be deterministically verifiable and provable if possible.
I'm excited about insurance for emerging markets. So like if you're a farmer in Kenya, you have no access to protection against US dollar rate against your local currency. So one of the things that if someone builds options, you could hedge, create hedging mechanisms, and local people in emerging markets could protect themselves.
Like you mentioned building blocks, which is exactly what these are. As we kind of move to this era where people are going to start developing dApps on Soroban, and building contracts and deploying those there, these tools, oracles and indexes, are going to be absolutely critical for them to be able to build these large-scale apps. And you look at the main Web 2 companies that have succeeded these days, and those big Goliaths out there all have got to where they are now because of the ability to manage and organize data on millions or hundreds of millions of users and people, but it's the same kind of thing applies. The ability for you to manage, maintain, organize, present, and distill information is critical to the success of a business. In terms of how they might work together, I quite like the idea of prediction markets. So you might use an indexer to index and aggregate information from another contract, let's say the outcome of some contract somewhere else in Soroban, and you might feed that back into another prediction market contract using an Oracle to be able to bet on the outcome of that. I think it'd be a pretty cool thing that you can easily do on Soroban using both indexes and oracles together.
Well, I think that's a great way to end. We are totally out of time. But please find the panelists around for the rest of the day and chat with them. And please give a round of applause for some great conversations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.